Hello and welcome to Nigeria Unfiltered, the program where we examine the issues shaping our nation through honest conversations and expert analysis. I'm Rowland Olabode. Now, security remains one of the most pressing concerns for Nigerians, from terrorism and insurgency to banditry and kidnapping, communal clashes, oil theft, and separatist tensions. The nation's security architecture continues to face enormous challenges. While government has invested in military operations, intelligence gathering, and interagency collaborations, many Nigerians are still asking an important question. Is Nigeria's current security architecture equipped to effectively address the country's evolving security threats? Joining us today to discuss these critical issues is Senator Iroegbo, a renowned security expert and analyst with years of experience. Senator Iroegbo, welcome to Nigeria Unfiltered.
Thank you very much.
We'll take a short break, and when we're back, we'll jump straight into the conversation. Stay informed. Welcome back to Nigeria Unfiltered. We're joined by Senator Iroegbo.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes, it's great to have you here. Now, let's jump into the conversation. We'll be looking at terrorism and insecurity and banditry across Nigeria. Now, between May 2023 and April 2024, an estimated 2.2 million Nigerians have been kidnapped. Ransoms totaling over 2.2 trillion naira have been paid. How is kidnapping still a growth industry in Nigeria?
There are so many factors that are responsible for it, and is because of one, there is the issue of the economic factor, whereby kidnapping has turned into a form of business for a lot of people. So both criminal organizations are venturing into it as a business. You know, since there is this cashless thing, you don't no longer have armed robbery where people stop people and rob people or go to their homes. So kidnapping becomes another route, unfortunately. Then another thing is the justice issue, because it's one of the crimes that people do and just get away with it without any kind of justice. Then a lot of ungoverned spaces within the country, whereby, especially because you check the pattern of the kidnapping, mostly at the rural and semi-urban centers. And those areas, there's almost complete collapse of governance system. What I mean collapse, because local governance infrastructure is already collapsed or non-existent. You ask yourself, when last do we have very effective local government? You know, in most, yes, we have it as part of our political map. But how many local government chairmen are on ground, councillors, and some of those infrastructure that makes governance closer to the people? So it's virtually absent. And in its presence, you begin to see criminal groups, non-state actors, infiltrating. And then the centralization of our policing system, whereby those areas are quite unpoliced the way it should be. And this has culminated in kidnapping, thriving in the country. So these are some of the background issues that have led to. And then also another thing, developmental also aspects of it. A lot of if you check, it's always a global phenomenon that the poorer or a place is, the more increase in the crime. So when you have large chunk of unemployed youth roaming about, so they become easy recruit for criminal gangs. And like I've told you earlier, that it has become like an economic franchise, whereby people are just entering, recruiting more youth available. Then the crime the capacity to tackle it to become most challenging, because the security architecture become overstretched, and because there are a lot of this crime going across the country. So most of our security agents or institutions are also stretched to be able to handle some of these things. And then there's also issue of real-time intelligence gap that is still, whereby be able to track in real time some of this. And there was this issue of a NIM SIM kind of NIN SIM linkage. And there'll be criticism that after this policy adaptation that we've not really seen result. But it's supposed to be able to help to track. That leads back to that lack of justice, whereby most of these kidnappers or criminals get away with their crime, without being caught, without being prosecuted, without being facing justice. And once people know that they can commit a crime and get away with it, it's an incentive to continue in that regard.
Well, from all you've said now, these are the challenges currently on ground.
Yes.
And it almost feels like terrorism or even the kidnapping has risen in this current administration. Are there things being done? Is the situation actually getting worse? Or are there any positives to look out for in this current administration?
Honestly, the situation has a bit gotten worse. Not in the volume. It gotten worse because in a way that, when the administration came in, due to the subsidy removal, the impact of subsidy removal, the cost of things went up. There was a lot of inflation. So a lot of attention we are focused on economic survival. In fact, most Nigerians, we are gasping for bread so the effort was to, also the government, most of the talking point was on the economy. And after 1 year of review of security incident, I remember I was in one of the television stations, and we give comparative analysis of a year review. Because of so much attention, even the media attention, the news report on the economy, the subsidy, the impact, the fallout, people didn't know that the security has really gotten worse. So when you look at the statistics compared to the previous, you find that there have been more kidnapping, more terrorist attacks, but it was underreported. So that the shift of the government to be able to steady the economy now means that less attention was actually focused on the fighting insecurity. Yes, there was the traditional aspect of appointing security chiefs, commanding them to go and just normal routine work. There wasn't deliberate, holistic new program that was adopted. Though there was the one that's there in the renewed hope security architecture. But in the last 1 year or so, there have been kind of expedited action to look into properly, with the police reform bill that have been introduced to decentralize the policing system. There was also the ongoing security and defense reform that House of Representatives are looking into. And there is this also the centralization of national data that NIMSI and the Ministry of Interior are looking into, so that they can harmonize our identity and data into single, so that when something happens at the tip of a thumbprint, you can be able to track and be able to have people's data so these are some of the measures that, and then recently, I think last 2 months or so, there was a creation and appointment of Homeland Security advisor. So these are some of the measures that have been taken, but just in the last few months. But for the past 2.5 years or 3 years, there was really not much apart from appointing or changing security chiefs. Yeah, yes.
Now, you mentioned the economy, right?
Yes.
The 1 year, and you also mentioned that it's as a result of how it affects Nigerians.
Yes.
Now, you can't say, or you can't point to the fact that Nigerians are poorer. What you say is because the general populace are being plunged into poverty. There is a an increase in the percentage of Nigerians that are subjected to poverty in the growing years. So is that a direct reflection for the cause of terrorism and banditry in Nigeria?
Yeah, there are a lot of things, but that adds to it. It adds to it because with that rise in inflation and all that, there are a lot of Nigerians that were pushed into, into poverty, actually, and it increased. In addition to rural banditry, there was also, if you notice, there's increase in urban crime, because a lot of people were pushed from the rural area into the urban centers, escaping banditry, escaping insecurity. They all came, and most of these people are unskilled to actually do some work in the urban. So increase of one chance, increase so many other crime that is going on. Then, in like I say, it's part of it. In addition, is that we still have the issue of porous borders around us, whereby the terrorists, if you check what is happening in the Sahel region, in our neighboring countries, and with the diplomatic or regional divorce that we witness in the ECOWAS, where these countries that are in the Sahel region, the alliance of the Sahel states, that the AES, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, pulling out from the ECOWAS, it also have impact. And if you check that area now, if you check every year for the past 4 years or so, that Sahel state has become the epicenter of terrorism. If you check the global terrorism index, they've ranked from number 1 to 5. If you check the top 10 most terrorized countries in the world, most of these countries are ranked in those, including Nigeria, in those top 10, of terrorized. So there's always, for the first time, the Jenin that have been operating in the Sahel, that's the Al-Qaeda affiliate, have penetrated penetrated Nigeria and actually launched attack. And in addition to this proliferation of kidnapping, criminal networks and incidents, there's also proliferation of terrorist network. We have Lakurawa, I have that's the Al-Qaeda affiliate. The Ansaru is still there. ISWAP is still there. The Boko Haram, the main Boko Haram is still there. So they are still operating. So, and these borders are still very porous. They can cross, they can come from the Sahel, move into Nigeria, and go back. So all these things are added to it. And with what is happening in the Middle East, because there is a spirited effort by the countries in the Middle East to actually push these terrorists, away from. So what happened? These terrorists have seen the Sahel as a safe haven, to operate crisscross. And Nigeria borders this Sahel region. In fact, the northern fringes of Nigeria is also part of the Sahel topography or environmental state.
Well, now it looks like Nigeria is facing multiple terrorist groups in that regard. So we're not exactly fighting one.
No.
What are the strategies for the government in tackling these multiple terrorist groups? Because I believe that for different terrorist groups, they have their own mode of operation, right? And so is it a centralized operation, or is it one that affects the general? Because you see different abductions and kidnappings or terrorist attacks, and some of them we have no one to blame. Some of them you can say, oh, it's Boko Haram. Some of them ISWAP. Who exactly are we holding accountable for these terrorist groups, and how are they being tackled?
Okay, knowing the number of terrorists is just for us to have knowledge and information. But that is not an excuse, whether there are 10, whether there are 20. The job, number one priority of a government, the social contract the citizens have with the government is to protect for security of life and property of Nigerians. So Nigerian government should ensure that Nigerians are protected and no territory in this country are left for non-state actors. Now, that's the basic fact. The other thing is also study their modes of operation, like you notice, some of them have their modes of operation that are different. So once you understand this, you know how to be able to. But fighting this or this as the insecurity or threat are multifaceted is the same way that the tackling them, the counter-terrorism or counter-insurgency or internal security operation has to be also be multifaceted. It can be kinetic, both kinetic and non-kinetic. That's application of force and the use of other means like development. Like I noted when I was giving the background or the foundation of why insecurity is increasing, I noted that the local governance system has collapsed, meaning that there's actually little or no presence of governance in most of our communities, most of our rural areas. The government they see is mostly from the capital, then to the federal government. As it used to be in the past, where local governance, even at the councillorship, government presence was felt, is no longer there. So there had to be more intelligent-less oppression. In fact, fighting terrorism is more of intelligence. But you can't get a real-time intelligence if the communities are not in a way linked to the government or have part ownership or governance. And that's why this decentralization of the policing system is also very important. But if you decentralize it just legally, it's at implementation. And if you decentralize it as just without effective governance at the local government level, it will just still be a challenge. Most of our local government, most of our rural communities are not governed properly. There's little or no government presence. So we still have to look for a long time for a more sustainable security. It has to go hand in hand. The governance, the local governance system need to be strengthened. Development at the local level need to be sustained, because once our youth are more engaged, you have less people to recruit. You have less people to think of crime or criminality to survive. And once these groups are starved of recruits, they are weaker for it. So while we are using the kinetic measures in improving our security architecture, our military, our police, our security intelligence agencies, we need to also improve our development. Then all these things will also lead to more effective human intelligence, because human intelligence is also very important. And this will also have to go hand in hand with other intelligence, electronic and other things like policing of the borders, surveillance instruments, to be able to track the movements of all these people. So everything has to work hand in hand for us to have effective security, And then coordination issue is also a challenge, because most of our security institutions are still working in silo, and there are this subtle rivalry that is going on. Yes, we've created Homeland security based at adversarial level. It's not an institution. Unlike the US, where you have Department of Homeland Security that coordinates everything about the homeland. Here, the military still operate in their own. They don't share real-time intelligence. This is what Office of National Security Advisor is supposed to coordinate, but there are still limitations in the way for the powers that are given to the NSA to be able to. They can't really command the Chief of Army Staff or the Chief of Naval Staff or the Chief of Air Staff or Chief of Defense Staff, except they have to cooperate. And those people still report directly to the president.
So. Yes, now you talked about the ungoverned spaces in local government areas. I believe that was one of the networks at which the Oyo abduction took place. Now, they were rescued with a number of them killed in the process. A number of those kidnappers were also arrested. But there's a lot of gray areas around that kidnapping. Some say, oh, it's not exactly as defined. We're not getting as much transparency in that case. What are the gray areas, and what are some things that like, strike a red flag in that situation for that abduction?
Yes, sometimes people are beginning to see this abduction thing like a sort of arranged thing. So it's still at the speculatory level, but there are a lot of things that need some answers. Where sometimes government will not come to tell you, okay, ransom was paid for this and that. And most in past instances, we have seen a situation where people were kidnapped in mass numbers, and there was a negotiation behind the scene, and government will tell you rescued, but it didn't. It wasn't rescued. It was released, and terrorists are not charity organization that will just release their victims. So, meaning that behind the scene there was kind of possible, because government will not come and officially and admit that it's not a government policy. So behind the scene there could be possibility of ransom payment, and then ransom payment in turn strengthens those kidnappers and terrorists to either buy more weapons, get more powerful, or come again to. So it becomes a vicious circle around that. So there are still some gray areas here and there, but I'll still leave it there because still at the realm of speculation. So, but what we should focus on is to ensure that such thing never repeats itself again. No Nigerian should be kidnapped, not even in that mass numbers. And why I'm saying this is a lot of ungoverned spaces is a problem, because people will be kidnapped in mass numbers even before those terrorists comes in. They move from one local government to another, from one community to another. Why they are making this movement? Even when they are going, no information, no real-time intelligence, no communication, no. Do you know what it takes to carry over 50, 100 people, some 150, 200? In the case of Kankara, all those casino and this thing, Ganjebe or something like that, they were up to 300, and these people move from distance, on bicycles, on other mobility infrastructures, or even walking along, and no communication. Nobody can even say, I noticed this movement, or even no security agents along those routes could notify and say, see what is happening. So that's why there are some things that when you begin to imagine, you begin to look, is this really real happening in a country? And it's happening too often that you begin to look, do we really have governance at all? Nigeria is only country across the globe where this kind of thing happen in a persistent or repetitive basis, and mass kidnapping from year to year, month intervals. And it's not something that we should be proud of, and it's not something that looks, it questions some certain things, the effectiveness of our security, policing, and defense architecture and infrastructure.
Yes, it does question it. In fact, when you look at the how much it has been happening consistently and consistently. Now, there is a question or the conversation of state police. In fact, how their integration could help. They could infiltrate some of these spaces and be able to give real-time intelligence. But there are critics that argue that most governors can use the state police to do their own bidding, because they would, commission the commissioner for the police in their region. Is this a true concern, or should we look more towards the benefits rather than what the challenges could be?
Yes, sir. I'm one of the proponents, even before this state policing gained traction. I've been one of the proponents speaking, campaigning for it. If I have a platform like this, I've always advocated for it. But are the concerns being raised genuine? Yes, they are genuine. I also have those concerns too. But when you are framing some of these I've said that once the state police is being framed or the laws are being considered, some of these concerns should be taken into consideration so that you can begin to create a countermeasure to ensure that some of these fears doesn't become reality. But be it as it may, there is no system, human system across the world that is perfect. No system at all, no institution that is perfect. But see where the catch is, the difference is when you look at if the advantage heavily outweighs the disadvantage, if the benefit outweighs the challenges, if the solution outweighs the challenge, you go with it, and then dedicate some effort to begin to tackle those small challenges. But if the challenges become overwhelming, almost equal with the advantages, that's where this concern is. So yes, there is this, if you don't go with the state police, are the option presently better? So let us even go with it and then see how we can start addressing those challenges of the governance. So one of my fear, in addition to those fears raised, is also we tend to corrupt. They say Nigerian, it's not as if Nigerian lack good policies, good laws, good programs, but the taste of the pudding is in the eating. It's at the implementation. Most times, when we begin to implement our laws, it tends to be corrupted at the implementation level because people begin to impose their own threat. That's why our institutions are not strong enough to begin to work on its own, irrespective of any character. Most times, it's the character of individual begin to define those institutions because it's still very weak. So, but that be as it may, while bearing those concerns in mind, we still have to look at the challenges and the benefits anticipated from having a state police. So there are some measures, countermeasures from the way the laws repealing the section 214, 215, 216 of the Federal Police is being passed, the one that from the House of and the Senate, and they are trying to harmonize it from the one from the presidency, is that yes, the governor will appoint subject to approval from the state assemblies, but there are some rules that bar them from in using it against their political opponent, using police against, so there are those clauses in the law so that it prevents them from doing that.
Well, the Tinubu approved around 1,000 forest guards after the Oyo attack. And according to reports, the children were hidden in a national park for about 56 days. Is that a security strategy, or is that a reaction from the presidency itself?
Before the Oyo kidnap, I think the Office of National Security Advice have already launched, I think around April or so this year, launched that National Forest Guard. So there's already discussions to make it have an effective National Forest Guard, because most of these forests, even from Sambisa to so many other, even in the northwest, have become safe haven for these terrorists. So if this thing is a right step in the right direction, but we have to also ensure that those, just like I say, most times we have good policies, but when it comes to the implementation phase, it becomes corrupted. You begin to see corrupt police officers, corrupt this that are being, compromised, becoming more, and begin to do contrary to what they are employed to. So these are some things we should begin to check. We should begin to put mechanism in play that be able to fish out corrupt elements as quick as possible. If you check other, it's not as if human beings are the same everywhere. That's why you see the same Nigerian that we come, we break traffic, like we do all this. If we go to where those things, you know that there's an instant punishment. You behave, you comply, because the laws are strict, the institutions are working effectively. So if you do, the system will fish you out, and the penalty is so severe. So in some country like China, it's death penalty. In some country like US or UK, your political career is ends or diminished, and most times your reputational damage, you may not recover from it again. But here, most times, no reputation, no institution. You see people who come, go shamelessness, they will still go, they will still get appointment again, they will still. So there are no consequences, there's no punishment for crime, for misbehavior. These are some of the things we need to also look critically.
Well, you can say that to a degree, our law system does work. Right?
It does work.
However, where exactly is the line to it not working or it's failing?
That's what the line is, where you see there are some where you see some certain things where you begin to question, where someone, this is a killer, and the law will give that killer like 10 years. You see someone who stole chicken or this thing being sentenced to death. There are some certain things you look at, and you see someone who people know that this person has really committed serious crime. Somehow he goes scot-free. It doesn't instill kind of trust in the minds of people. And when people don't trust institutions enough, they begin to lose that kind of volunteer. People volunteer information. They believe in this system. So our laws works, but sometimes you see there are some loopholes, some powerful people and criminals take advantage of and begin to, continue to in their criminal ways. So that's it. And it's something we continue as active citizens, continue to call it out, continue to, no system is perfect, but most societies have improved is by calling out things that are not, so that you can continue working on it, improving better than you were yesterday.
Truly important that we have a fix in that institution where people can be more trusting towards the government institutions. Now, let's take a short break, and when we're back, we'll continue the conversation. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Nigeria Unfiltered. We're having an insightful conversation with Senator Iroegbo about the security challenges in the country. Now, let's jump into the conversation around women in politics. Female politicians consistently report targeted harassment and violence during campaigns. Is political violence against women a security issue, or does Nigeria treat it as just politics?
It should have been a security issue. It should be a security, but Nigerians still treat it like politics. They will say, if you can't stand the heat, why be in the kitchen? But it's high time we begin to, there's something that is called equity. Equity, not equality. You can call it, treat it as politics when you're looking at it as equality. Okay, you say you're a woman, you want to trade where other men, the field is open, face what other men too face harassment. But when you begin to look at it as a form of equity, knowing that these women are coming from a disadvantaged position, they are coming into a field that they are relatively unknown, that is new to them. They don't have a head start. You begin to give them some privileges that will help them to, push them forward. So this is where I think government should also focus to ensure that women are not become a target of political thuggery and insecurity and harassment, to make the field relatively a bit. I know the men folk will say, we face the same challenges too, why are you giving them? But yes, if you check even up to now, 90% of political office is both in appointment and elective offices are occupied by men, you know. So, and Nigeria is one of the lowest when it comes to women participation and representation. I know there have been a lot of effort on the issue of affirmative action, and there have been a lot of campaign to also give some quota and some slot. So these are some of the ways you can also guarantee, ensure that women participation, gain some traction. So maybe when we reach some certain threshold, we can say, okay, the field is now open. They've learned the rope. They can stand the heat and this and that.
It's really important that women are, guided around some of these political conversations. Now, let's jump into our rapid fire question.
Okay.
So in this segment, I'll ask you a question and you respond with just one word.
Okay.
One word to answer the question. Now, the first question, Nigeria's security in one word.
Challenging.
The biggest single failure in Nigeria's security architecture.
Intelligence.
State police, solution or new problem?
Solution.
Intelligence or firepower? Which does Nigeria need more of?
Intelligence.
Most underreported security threat in Nigeria right now?
Kidnapping.
Forest guards, serious policy or political theater?
Serious policy.
Is Nigeria winning or losing the war against banditry?
Losing.
One institution that must be reformed urgently?
Police.
Nigeria's security in 5 years, better or worse?
Optimistically better.
Optimistically better. That has been quite a conversation, in fact. We talked about a number of topics, a number of conversations. Now, Senator Iroegbo, thank you for sharing your valuable insights on Nigeria's security architecture and the steps needed to build a safer and more secure nation. Now, as we've heard today, strengthening Nigeria's security requires more than military action alone. It calls for effective leadership, improved intelligence, stronger institutions, the use of modern technology, collaboration among security agencies, and active support from citizens. Thank you for watching Nigeria Unfiltered. I am Rowland Olabode. Join us next time as we continue to ask the difficult questions and explore practical solutions to the issues affecting our nation. Until then, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay safe. This has been Nigeria Unfiltered.